Good afternoon, LEC community. Thank you so much for being with us for another edition of Ask an Educator. Most of you may know my name is Susana Elisa Raraz, and I am the Deputy Director of the Latinx Education Collaborative. Our organization is working to increase Latino representation in K through 12 classrooms. And of course, we do some of that through our retention work of community building and community fostering. And that is what Ask an Educator is all about. I'm really excited to have a friend of ours, Jen Vincent, here with us today. Jen, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I know you just got off of a long day of teaching, so I'm
Yeah,
always appreciative when we get, classroom teachers on the live because I know you've had, regardless of what went well or not today, it's always a long day when you're a teacher.
for sure.
Well, Jen, if you don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Sure. So, my name is Jen Vincent. I currently teach eighth grade language arts and social studies. I have two sections. One section is monolingual, and the other section is dual language, English and Spanish. I'm also a business owner, so I do workshops and coaching through Story Exploratory.
I love that. I love it. If you don't mind, I'm gonna ask a little bit about that in this interview because
Right.
it resonated so much with me when you mentioned it in our meeting. And feel free to kind of blend it into the conversation. I know, of course, this your role as a teacher is amazing, but I also, want to shout out the other things that you have going on because they're so cool.
Mhm.
So let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit of your leadership story, either your upbringing, your journey as a student or as a professional, anything that you feel that is most relevant to credit where you are today.
Mhm. So when I was a kid, I grew up north of Chicago in a place called Lake Forest. Which when I ask people like the students around here, I'm like, what do you know about Lake Forest? There's a lake. But most of the time they know that it's a very affluent area. There's a lot of big fancy houses. People drive, shiny new cars. They shop at the fancy stores in town. And that was not me. My family rented a 2-bedroom apartment. We didn't really have new cars. My dad sold cars when I was a kid. So sometimes he would have a new car that we would have like as a demo. But we didn't really have our own new cars. And if I could shop in the stores in town, like I'd have like one Gap sweatshirt. And it was like, I was very
Mhm.
proud of my Gap sweatshirt. So I grew up really not feeling like enough. And then to add on to that, I was also Latina. And so I often didn't see people who looked like me in just like around town in school, or in the books that I was reading.
Mhm.
The library was like a safe space for me though. So I could go to the library and I could check out any book that I wanted and as many books that I wanted. And I
Mhm.
could be reading the same books that kids around me were also reading. So it was really an equalizer for me. And
Mhm.
I really fell in love with books because of that. But still, there was a problem with not being able to see myself in stories. I grew up in the 80s, so a lot of the books were about white kids, dogs,
Mhm.
not so
Mhm.
much about someone who looked like me and had experiences like
Yeah,
me. So as
the Babysitters Club
I
and
love
those.
the
Yeah.
Babysitters Club. The Babysitters Club did have like now it's a Netflix series and there's even I feel like more diversity in the show. If you haven't seen it,
What?
it's great. They did a really good job. It's a really
Okay,
good
I'm
job,
gonna
and
have
there
to
are
go.
graphic novels as well now. So,
Nice.
Babysitters Club was fun because I did feel like I see like a range of girls with like different interests and different styles, and
Yeah, yeah.
they were celebrated. So that was actually really empowering for me. Um, okay, this is a sidetrack, but my friends and I had a Babysitters Club ourselves. Like we decided to start our own little Babysitters Club, and so I babysat all through middle school and high school. And now I see like sort of how my entrepreneurial spirit started with that. Like it
Mhm.
makes sense that I would start my own business because that was what I did, as a kid. And
Mhm.
it's about reading and writing. And that's also what I do, as a teacher is reading and writing with young adults. And so Story Exploratory lets me share that with adults as well. Yeah, so I really fell in love with books. And, school was just a place where I felt like I really could um, feel empowered. I felt like I could follow the rules, do what I needed to do, and it
Mm.
was a safe place for me. Um, And that's really when I fell in love, I think, with reading and writing and with school. And then of course, I would babysit, so I love children, and that led to me being a teacher. My undergrad is working with kids who are deaf and hard of hearing. So I worked in special ed first.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um, and actually in college, I didn't take any Spanish classes because I didn't think that I would need them. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to work with kids who are deaf and hard of hearing. Doesn't, I don't really see the benefit of it. And I think, thinking back to so much of how I was raised and people I was around, like I just really wasn't proud of being Latina for a really long time, until I went to college and then I started student teaching and I worked in areas where there was a much bigger Latinx population. And then schools were like just really saw that it was valuable that I could speak Spanish, and that was really when I was like, oh my gosh, this is an important thing, and
Hmm.
it really got me to think about like culturally how I really believe in humans first and taking care of people, and that was something that I then started to embrace once I got into teaching and was working with so many Latinx families. It really opened my eyes to see just how awesome it is and how exciting it is and how great it is that we can speak multiple languages and share that. And yeah, and now we have so many more books that do represent our diversity even within being
Hmm.
Latinx. So it's fun to now have seen how that has shifted and now get to celebrate and highlight authors and illustrators, and then also to encourage my students to write for themselves. So
I love that.
thanks.
I love that. A couple of things you said, I would love to kind of talk a little bit more about. So first, you talked about starting your career with working with deaf and hard of hearing kids.
Mhm.
Do you know sign language by any chance?
I do, yes. I'm a little bit rusty. Like I ran into a friend from college over the summer and I was like, "Ooh, you have to slow down for me." But yeah, I was really interested in learning sign language and I took a course in high school. The instructor was deaf and he knew I wanted to be a teacher and he was like, "Well, why don't you work with kids who are deaf?" And I was like, I never even thought of it before. So,
Yeah.
I went and looked into it and that's what I did at first.
That's awesome. That I
Mhm.
mean, it resonates with me. My mom is deaf, and she
Oh my
never learned
gosh.
sign language. She grew up in
Wow.
Mexico, and they didn't have those resources,
Mm.
right? And so my son, he has a trach, and he won't be verbal for as
Oh,
long as he has
wow.
his trach. And so, as a family, we're actually learning sign language, and I've been getting pretty good at it. Like
That's awesome.
yeah, so it's so cool.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I also, when I taught at the deaf and hard of hearing school for the district.
Okay, yeah.
Um, just life, the way that life works and
Mhm.
it like a recurring theme in my life. That's so cool. That's so
It's
cool.
so cool. One thing I
Yes,
think, like, I just feel like when I look back, so this is my 20th year in education, and when I look back to all the like twists and turns along the way, a lot of the times it was something that I was like, "Oh, that's fun," and I just went with it, and I just followed the flow and let it see where it would take me. So, yeah, like deaf culture, I think is really interesting, and I oftentimes will teach students the sign language, especially as we're like bridging between English and Spanish, because a lot of the signs make sense, like to
yes,
prioritize things. I'm like, okay, y'all, you have this whole list of things to do. But,
yes,
in sign language, like priorities, like what's on top, what's going to come first.
yes.
So there's a lot of signs like that that make a lot of sense. And so I'll oftentimes incorporate them to make them visual, especially as we're bridging between English and Spanish. Yeah. Or vocabulary in general.
That is so genius. N Oh my gosh, like, I'm having an epiphany right now because so we have a teacher who comes to our house to
Mm.
teach us sign
Yeah.
language and through a nonprofit here in the city, and, when she's teaching me, I have to, like, make those visual connections,
Mm.
and you just made me realize, like, that is such an amazing, ELL strategy
Yeah.
too. Like, so for me, like,
Yeah.
I struggled forever to remember the word "remember."
Oh, yeah.
But then I was like, "Okay, you take it from your brain and then you, like, paste it onto, like." But
Remember
the
it. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
gosh, okay, that's amazing. And the other thing you mentioned that really resonated with me, was when you talked about, I can't remember it now because I just got so excited about the
That's
DHH stuff.
okay.
Um, while I tried to remember, I did post,
Oh,
Jen's,
thanks.
yeah, or business into the comments, and so if you're interested in learning more, um, So, by the way, tell us a little bit about the story exploratory and how it came to life.
So it came to life for me because I realized that there were a lot of people, like on social media and conferences that I would go to, talking about the love of reading, but not as many talking about the love of writing. And there definitely are resources out there, but I realized that I really love to write. I had great teachers when I was in middle school and high school. Actually, I had readers and writers workshop. And so I've always felt comfortable with writing, and it's something that I enjoyed. And as I was looking at resources, I realized there weren't as many about writing. And I feel like reading and writing go together so much. And when we read, it like gives us all these examples of really great writing. And then the transfer skill to me is to be able to go and write yourself, right? So I started writing for myself just for fun. I had friends who were doing NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And then from there, I just kept going and really embraced the idea of a teacher who writes is better able to serve students as writers, right? Like we're better able to say like, oh my gosh, this happened to me before. Or when I feel stuck, here's what I do. Or let's look at what somebody else has done in their ending. Or this is a way I've ended a story before, you know? So that really was just like I just love writing so much, and in exploring different types of writing. So I've written picture books, young adult novels, essays more recently, and I'm working on writing for teachers more. Um, and I'm only published, like I've published a couple things, but not like a book yet. So I'm really excited to continue my journey on that. But it just has gotten me really excited to see how much through writing I learn about myself. So I talked
Yeah.
before about like really struggling to embrace my Latinidad, and writing really helped
Mhm.
me do that. I
Mhm.
remember talking to a friend. I was really frustrated, and he was like, "Well, what do you want the world to know?" And at the
Mm.
time, I had been to Guatemala once. My mom is from Guatemala. And
Mhm.
I had only been once in my whole life. I didn't get to go till I was 36. And
Mm.
that was really hard for me to not know like where my family is from. My mom grew up there. I have uncle and cousins who still live there, you know, and it was just a place that I've always had longing for, and I've never gotten to know.
Mm.
So when he said, like, well, what do you want the world to know? I was like, I need them to understand that like I like desperately love Guatemala and I love my culture, but I want to know it more, you know?
Mhm.
So I wrote this essay, and basically by the end, it was like, why don't you go? It was like
I
I had
love
this
that.
revelation of like, just go, you know? Um, and there, I just feel like for women especially, but I think in general, we grow up with society telling us what we should do, and like, you
Mm.
know, really trying to conform,
Mm.
it's not easy to be like, no, I'm going to do it my way. But writing
Mhm.
really helped me do that. So that was like a huge moment for me to be like, you know what? I'm gonna go. And so I
Mhm.
was able to take 2 trips before the pandemic hit, on my own. Like I stayed with my cousins. We went rock climbing, and it just was like really, really great. And I just feel like there are other things in my life that writing has helped me explore what I was feeling, explore like just self-doubt that I've had, or just the ups and downs along the way. So
Mhm.
I use writing to reflect at night, and that really helps me center and know that I'm doing good things even when there are frustrations happening in the
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I feel like writing has just helped me in so many ways, and so it's fun to get to write, but also helps me process and know and understand myself, and help me make choices going forward.
Yeah, I love
So I
that.
think the question was about story exploratory. So
No,
the
that's
workshops are helping people use writing, to really, you know, get in touch with yourself, to help yourself recognize those things that you're feeling like when you feel stuck and you're like, I don't know, something doesn't feel right, or I don't know the way forward. I just don't feel like I'm living the life I'm supposed to be living, you know? I mean, you
Mhm.
get that moment where you're like, how did I get here? I don't know how I got
Mhm.
here, you know?
Mhm.
So we use writing to be able to reflect and think about that, and then also see a way forward.
I love that. That was actually one of the thing that I forgot that resonated with me while you were talking, is that for me as a student, and I think for a lot of students, I've always been a good reader and a quote unquote good reader, quote unquote good writer,
Mhm.
but I never learned to love it. And
Mm.
so in my college years, it was again still like you just gotta skim it and get by
Yeah.
with what you can and just write
Mhm.
as well as you can. So now that I'm further into my career and advocating for and supporting other adults and teachers. I'm trying to learn to find the love for reading and
Yeah.
writing.
Mhm.
um, I think we do an injustice to our students so often when we're like, it has to start with this and it has to end with this, then it has to
Mhm.
be structured like this and start here and end there.
Mhm.
And I did that very well because I just was an academic, right? Like I really did like school and I knew how to, like
Yeah.
you said, follow the rules and
Mhm.
get your A's. But I think we often fail, and for me in particular, and I think for my classmates, um, we weren't given the opportunity to learn to love to read.
Mm.
And when you said that, like you
Yeah.
said, man, but being in books helped me be in another world. That helped me. I'm like, I never got that, So
Mhm.
it's really cool. I mean, I imagine that you take that with you into the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really believe in giving kids choice and helping them connect with books that they want to read, and that's often, like, when a kid's like, "I don't like to read," it's like, "Well, we've gotta find something," there's something that you will enjoy, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and I usually ask them, like, "What was the last thing you watched on TV? Like, what kind of stuff are you into?" Just trying to them connect with something. I like take it as a challenge, when they're like, "No, I only like this kind of thing." Okay, then that's the kind of reader you are, you're a
Hmm.
Captain Underpants reader, and we know that about you. You're a
Hmm.
Babysitter's Club reader, and we know
Hmm.
that about you, right? And then we can
Hmm.
like grow from there.
Hmm.
And I think that's really important. It's why I read so much, because I want to make sure I have lots of ideas for things
Mm.
to help kids connect with. And then writing, I think choice is really important too. I remember 2 years ago at the beginning of the year, we were doing a free write, and a student was like, "Can I write about," like, he like called me over, "Can I write about the time that I, like, how I got my scar?" And he had like a scar on his eyebrow.
Mm.
And I was like, "Yeah, you can." And I
Mm.
just, to me, it just stands out as a question where it's like, does my story matter? Does that
Yep.
count? Is it
Yep.
too, I don't even know, like, I don't even know what he was thinking. Like, was it too gory? Was it too, like, not a happy story, right? Like, is he expecting that I'm going to write about something
Mm.
hopeful or exciting, And yeah, I'm very conscious of that, because I feel like there's a tendency for teachers to ask questions that kids then think like, "Oh, well, that's what they want to see," or even
Mhm.
something like, "What did you do this weekend?" Like, there's even things like that where it can come across as like, "You were supposed to do something really great and fun, and I just hung out at home and made breakfast with my family," so yeah, so I try to really honor their stories and let them know that my students, I'm like, "You've lived for 13 or 14 years, you've experienced a lot of things, and
Mhm.
people want to hear your stories and want to know, is my story like yours?" Or they want to know, "Oh, that's different from my story." They're learning from that, but like, your story matters and you do have a lot to share. So I really
Yeah.
believe in, helping them realize that and know, it's, again, it's like embracing, helping them embrace who they are, right? Their identity, and knowing that they do matter. I think
Yeah.
it's just such a powerful way to bring those things together.
Well, and it's such a societal norm, unfortunately, and especially in schools, to look for the what's most typical, right? Wait,
Yeah.
teacher, what do you want? Wait, teacher, and
Yeah.
I that resonates with me. I have always loved to write, but I started doing it a little bit in my adulthood, and then I stopped. I have a blog and everything, and then I
Oh,
stopped because I was like, what do people think? What, you get
yeah.
like, am I supposed to write like this? Do I put this in there? Do I not
Yeah.
make jokes in my writing? But again, it's the way that we've conformed
Mhm.
to the way that school often tells us it has to be like this and structured this way. I also
Yeah.
want to tap into something that comes up often and that you and I connected on in our first meeting, and that's like not knowing if you're the right amount of Latina, right?
Yeah.
Like the in between, and you talked about the movie Enya, right? Or
Yeah.
what's it? It's called the Enya, right?
Be Yeah, yeah.
Being Enya, yes. That in between is something that I share with so many teachers that I talk to. Is like, no matter what part of the spectrum, no matter what languages or not language, it seems like a lot of us have this like, I didn't know if I should reach out to the LEC because I'm not really that Latina, and then it's
Mhm.
like, there's no such thing, right? But
Right.
you and I connected on that yesterday when I was like,
Mhm.
I've totally felt that in my life before.
Yeah. I was just talking to the students about that today. We were talking about memoir and memoir as a type of writing and how it's, the person sharing their experience. And I was saying how um, that is how we get over like stereotypes and bias, right? And people
Mm-hmm.
thinking that we are a monolith. There's, if you know one thing about us, everything, we're all the same, right? It's like we just need more stories and more people telling their stories and sharing their stories. And I think that's really empowering. And it's also affirming to read what other people have written about and what they've experienced. Because I think we do, like, I think there's a lot of commonalities. I think belonging for sure shows up
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of Latinx, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mix. I grew up in a very like white space. Like I said, I denied my Latinidad for a long time. So, aunque
Mm-hmm.
hablo español, even though
Mm-hmm.
I do speak Spanish, like there's still, I messed up something today. I wrote La Corazon, and my students were like, one kid was like, La Corazon. And I was like, yeah, like it touches your heart. And this other girl was like, Miss Vincent, it's El Corazon. I'm like, ah. And it was just like,
Yeah.
and I paused and told the kids, I was like, thank you for correcting me. You were
Yeah.
polite and you were kind. Like you checked in, you didn't just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I appreciate that. My heart is racing. I feel like kind of embarrassed, but I'm not gonna think too much about it. I'm just gonna let it go. We're all
Yeah.
learning. And one of my students was like, "You're learning." Like it was just really cute. I'm like, I'm not really learning that. I'm just tired more than anything else. But still, I
Yeah.
totally make mistakes, and
Yeah.
I think those are really great conversations to have, that
Yes.
we all make mistakes, and that's part of it. Yeah, but I do think more, and like I think more often than not people do feel not enough in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Mm-hmm.
happen to be, I'm a mix. My dad is Irish and Welsh, my mom is from Guatemala, so I often feel like I'm not white enough, I'm not Latina enough. Like I often feel
Mm-hmm.
for sure caught between that. And I think I know one of the questions we wanted to talk about is like advice for people, and I think
Yes.
the cultural aspect, I think, is something that we can't ignore and like can't forget to recognize, right? I had a coworker who would come in and like would just say hello to everybody, would greet everybody, like hugs or high fives, or it was just a very warm and welcoming way that she greeted everybody. And she was Latina, and it was so interesting because I remember one time a coworker was like, "Oh," it just kind of was like, "There she goes," being her. And I remember thinking like, gosh, but that is she exudes her Latina-ness, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
it just like comes out. And I feel like um there are just different times when I think culture shows up in different ways that we
Mm-hmm.
just have to be aware of and recognize that. And I think being able to be like, oh, this is a cultural thing, right? Like this is
Mm-hmm.
something that's coming up because of how my culture looks at the collective and how we take care of each other and how we are responsible to each other. And not that like American society doesn't do that.
Yeah.
I think it just can
Mm-hmm.
look different. So
Yeah.
being able to recognize that is a helpful thing.
Yeah. I mean, and also, I mean, yeah, recognizing that there's no standard for
Hmm.
really any culture, right? But speaking as a Latina, right, and meeting so many different Latinos from all over the world, and all different types of backgrounds, and all of that, knowing that there is no standard, right? But unfortunately, we're ingrained. It's ingrained in us that there's a standard when really there isn't, right?
Hmm.
So to kind of shift over to some of the hurdles that maybe you've had in making in having your career in teaching, or maybe even with the story exploratory, that made that a little bit more difficult.
I think, well, store exploratory is interesting because that I feel like I couldn't just follow the rubric and be successful. Like I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's so much of like, "Ooh, I'm just gonna figure this out. I'm gonna Google this and I'm gonna try it and see how it goes, and I'm gonna take that feedback and keep going." So I guess it does relate to teaching because when you're planning lessons, right? Like you plan your lesson out and you see how it goes. And then as you get started, you shift and you make decisions from there. And I didn't really realize the connection in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, like, I'm very proud of being a reflective teacher. And I think
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning, like, I was in a mentoring program and then I have mentored people. I'm a national board certified teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And just in any conversation, I feel like it's about reflecting, right? Whether it's with myself or with other people, it's like pausing to think like, okay, how did this go? Right. And what information now do we have? Like if something doesn't go well, then I'm like, okay, now I know that
Mhm.
was a mismatch. They need more scaffolding or they need more information or more modeling, like it's just information to shift and go forward.
Mhm.
So I think that to me is like one of like a superpower. I feel like that good effective teachers have is that ability to be honest with themselves and real about what just happened and then
Mhm.
to use that information to plan forward. So I think being reflective and trying to be okay like when things don't go the way you want them to go, and be
Mhm.
okay to be like, okay, that is not what I
Mhm.
thought was going to happen,
Mhm.
or man, I don't feel like I was an amazing teacher today. But
Mhm.
if you're there and you can be there for the kids and even own your mistakes, like me
Mhm.
with the students today, I'm like, oh, that was a mistake, thank you for checking
Mhm.
in. Like, I
Mhm.
think that kind of humanity is what we need more of in education.
Mhm.
Modeling teachers, modeling that, administrators modeling that, and inviting students to recognize that it's
Mhm.
okay, we're humans.
Mhm.
This is what we
Yeah.
do. I think that's
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially in teaching. It's so important to be reflective and to be open to feedback. But we also live in a world that makes it seem like that's like, oh, I'm doing something wrong or I'm doing something
Yeah.
bad.
Mhm.
I remember when I first started teaching, I cried to my husband because I was like, I can't be like teaching is a type
Mm.
of job where you can't just be 100% proficient in everything. Like
No.
I was so used to school as a student and in my job in
Right.
college where it was like you turned out productivity and it was like boom, 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 you're good, you got A's,
Yeah.
you got a
Mhm.
gold star, all the things. And teaching, it's literally a minute by minute, an hour
Mhm.
by hour kind of
Yeah.
situation where it's like this class went amazing or this section of the room is going amazing
Right.
or it's going amazing with Jen, but Susana's over here struggling, right? Like I
Yep.
really had to. It's one of those things where you have to really um, be flexible with your
Mhm.
mentality and be
Mhm.
flexible with your self-esteem and be flexible with your confidence to
Mhm.
know, like, yeah, that lesson bombed, but like we're gonna come back strong tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yes, I'm with that.
I've
It
had
was
those
so
moments.
hard.
It's always makes me laugh because it's like things will go great and then I'm like, "Oh, I forgot attendance." Like it's just there's always something.
Yeah.
Um, you know.
Yeah, or you're in I mean, there are times when I'd be in the middle of a lesson and you think it's going great, and then I was a math teacher. You're mid-problem and you're like, "I've been doing it wrong this whole time, so now I have to tell them to stop," and then they're off, and they're like, "No, Miss
Right.
Ellie, you lost all
Yeah.
credibility."
Yeah, I know. Oh my
Now,
gosh. Yes.
through all of that, right, through all of the struggles, through the nuances of the day in and day out of being a teacher, what keeps you going?
Oh, I think I do really love people. Like I really, really love people. I'm a super extrovert. I really enjoy interacting with people. And, students I think are just so special. I think that's another thing that I hope that the education system looks more closely at, that these are or not just not even the system, but society in general. Like these are our kids, right? Like I are really doing our best to take care of them and do what we can. And I feel like we need more resources and more access to resources and support in so many different ways.
Mhm,
Um, but I mean, I really think it comes down to them and wanting what's best for them. And I just am somebody who can see like right to somebody's soul. Like,
mm,
like any whatever behavior you can throw at me, like I am just like I see the good in you. I see this like beautiful human soul that's inside. And I can also see that you've probably been through so many different things that has led you to make this choice in this situation, right? Or done that. Like I just yeah, I just really see
mhm,
the good in every kid. And so
mhm,
that I feel like is why I keep showing up, because I just want to see people be able to bring that out. And which
mhm,
is what I do in Story Exploratory, right? Like I want you to be like, "Oh, I wanted to go do this thing and I'm doing it." Like
mhm,
I've had this dream of wanting this and like, okay, do it. Like I feel like I'm definitely a catalyst for change. I'm definitely someone who's like, you should totally do that. Go do that. And I that's what I really see in kids. And I also feel like it, it's for little me, little Jen Vincent,
Mm-hmm.
when she was little, trying to find her way and see and understand who she was. And so I feel like, it's just remembering that I've been there before, and I've had teachers along the way who saw
Mm-hmm.
me, and like saw that I was a good writer and pushed me to read harder books. Like it's so nice to have had those people in my life, and so to think that I could be that for somebody else, um, and to know that I'm taking care of little me in some way by doing good work. I think is really, I think it's a good thing. And then it makes me think of like ancestors, right? The people who came before. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's just we're all connected, and for me, it's about humanity, like just the
Mm-hmm.
human connection to me is really what teaching is about.
Yeah, I love that. I that so resonates with my love for teaching and my sadness for not being in the classroom anymore. I mean, but seeing
Hmm.
and kids are so open to that. Like they're so open to you saying, "Do it. You should do it." Of course, I had middle school as well, so they're a little. Some of them are a little bit like, but like kiddos are so much more open to you being like, "Try it. Let's
Go
see what
for it.
happens. Go for
Yeah.
it." And they're like, "Are you sure?" "Yes, do it." Whereas
Hmm.
adults, you have to, you know, they're like, "No," but then kids are so
Hmm.
much more open to that, and that's really
Yeah.
cool.
You have a student who's trying out for show choir. Um, he's going to be
Nice.
he's going to be a freshman next year in high school. So eighth grade is such a fun year because I feel like it's this shift, from like
Mhm,
being a student and then taking on just more responsibility and having things
mhm,
open up a bit. So I was telling
mhm,
him, he's like, well, but I don't know about this. I'm like, you email, you call, it's just like that person to be like, this is how you do it. What's the first baby step? And just go for it and let's figure
mhm,
it out. So it's
mhm.
exciting.
Yeah, I mean, and it's cool because teachers like you, that information is pretty readily accessible to us, whereas for them, that's a big mountain
Hmm.
to climb over to, like, get to a phone call, right? And to
Right.
have someone who for us, it's like it's as easy as Googling it and being like, "Here, I'm gonna sit with you. Here it is on a Post-it note," and
Hmm.
there you've just helped them climb over that big mountain.
Yeah.
Um, that's so sweet. I love that. You touched on this a little bit earlier, but just to reiterate, kind of a piece of advice you would give to educators struggling right now. I hear all across our community that this year in particular has been pretty difficult in schools, and so any piece of advice or words to uplift our educators.
Hmm. I really would like to invite people to write and use writing as reflection. And it could, like, I know people don't want to add extra things to do, but I have, like, here it is. I have like just a legal pad. This is from the Dollar Tree. It's just a
I
legal
love
pad.
that.
And every night I will draw, and I divide my paper in half. On this side, I write 7 things that I saw, 7 things that I did, and then I draw something and I write something that I heard. And this comes from Linda Berry, who's like
Mm.
she's like an artist who also writes. She's fascinating. Her books are amazing. If you don't know her work, I think they have them at school. Um
Oh.
but I've been practicing this all year because I feel like it just helps me like take the stuff that's in my head and in my heart and in my body and like put it outside of me. Like I don't know about you, but March 1st hit and I was like, ooh, something just shifted in my body. Like I think it knows that the anniversary of the shutdown is coming. Like I think my body is like, prepare, because it was traumatic. It was a big deal. So
Hmm.
I think a lot for me is like try to take this stuff and like almost download it onto the paper. I feel like I'm putting it somewhere, so I'm not
Mm.
holding on to it as much. And then I tend to overthink things. So when something right like doesn't go well, and I'm like, gosh, I didn't expect, that this was gonna go this way or this is gonna happen, then I start to like really it's almost like a puzzle. I'm like, okay, what can I do differently? How can I shift? What do I need to change? And sometimes it's just too much. I have to just turn my brain off and stop
Mm.
like just searching for the answer. So I find that this type of reflection just lets me put it out there and then I can see it a little bit more objectively. But as I mentioned before, it also lets me celebrate because sometimes I'm like, you know what? This was like a breakthrough with this student. And I can like write that down too, right? Like, oh, well, I talked to so and so because they stormed out one day and then yesterday they
Hmm.
didn't. Yesterday they were like, Miss Vincent, I need to go, I need to go,
Oh.
get a drink. Okay. Like the fact that they could communicate that is like progress. You know what I mean? So like it's things like that that I think I'm excited because I'm I've been doing this all year, so I'm excited to be able to look back and like see the progressions and see how things shift. But for me, it's just a way to like celebrate as well, because I think we tend to see the not so good things and like, really settle in on like, oh, I wish I could have done that differently, or how am I going to do it differently tomorrow? And if we can celebrate things, I think it's helpful. And I realized last year that when we came back to school last school year and we were remote, I just remember thinking like, I am going to have to take care of myself. Like just with everything going on, it was like nobody's taking care of me. You know what I mean? Like nobody really knows what I need and what's gonna help me. I'm gonna have to do it. I have to figure this out for myself. So writing was a big way for me to be able to do that, and just to like sit, listen to myself, let some stuff out, also acknowledge the things that are going well, so I could find things to celebrate as well. So yeah. So, but you could even write just like one thing or two things you're grateful for. I think it could be like super, super simple, but I think that's a practice that you can do on your own just to help yourself see things. Yeah. And know that it's okay. Know it's going to be okay. And it's gonna, it's going to work out. It's always going to work out. So.
It's one of those things that is kind of low floor because there's low risk to it, right? I mean, of course, publishing and all of that comes with more of the anxiety, but like pulling it out of the, Post-it note and saying like, this went well, let's work on this tomorrow,
Yeah.
I really, really love that. So to kind of wrap up our conversation, and to encompass, I've loved this interview, and really you've been giving me advice because I need to get back to my writing, honestly. But if there was anything you wanted to leave your students to leave your classroom with, or if someone who took one of your workshops with the Story Exploratory, what's one thing you want them to leave with?
I want them to leave knowing that they matter. Like ultimately, that's what about. I'm gonna make myself cry. I want them to know that they matter. I had a friend who's going through a really hard time, and I was like, "You are loved." Like whatever you're feeling or thinking, I'm telling you, I love you, and you are loved. Like that counts now as a statement. Like don't ever think that someone doesn't love you, because I love you. And I tell my students like I adore you. I respect you. Like I appreciate who you are and everything that you are. And, I repeat that to them a lot. I don't know. In Chicago, there's a like You Are Beautiful store, and there are You Are Beautiful stickers that are all over the place. So I give my students You Are Beautiful stickers. And so that's just ultimately it. I just want them to know that they matter, and that just like who they are and how they show up and everything they've experienced matters. It matters. You're here and you count and you're worthy, like just you're here. You're doing a good job.
I love that. I mean, I'm so grateful that your students have you and that the world has you as a teacher and Story Exploratory. You've absolutely inspired me, and I thank you for the work that you're doing and what you pour into your students every day. It's absolutely appreciated, and it's seen. I see it. So thank you for that. Any final thoughts or
No, just thank you so much. I'm glad that LEC exists. I think it's so great that we have, more ways to connect and to share stories and know that we aren't alone. I think that's so powerful and empowering. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, of course. Well, Jen, thank you so much for being with us. LEC community, well, I hope you enjoyed the interview, and check out Story Exploratory. The link is in our comments. Bye, everyone.